In 2006, Nokia owned the world. One in every two phones sold was a Nokia. Indestructible, reliable, unbeatable. Then Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in 2007, held up a glass slab called the iPhone, and Nokia's engineers laughed. They said the antenna was weak. They said it couldn't survive a drop test. They were absolutely right about the hardware, but they were catastrophically wrong about everything else. While Nokia was busy counting screws and measuring millimeters, Apple was building an ecosystem, and Google was giving away Android for free. The king of phones didn't fail because they made bad products. They failed because they were too successful to care about the future. They saw the revolution coming, and they chose to look away. The most haunting part? Their chairman later said, "We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost." That's not a failure. That's a warning for every giant who thinks their size makes them safe. To understand the magnitude of Nokia's fall, you must first understand the suffocating weight of its peak. In 2006, Nokia commanded a staggering 46% global market share. That meant nearly half of every mobile phone sold on planet Earth carried the Nokia logo. The company was valued at over $250 billion at its zenith in the year 2000. More than Apple, more than Samsung, more than almost any tech company on the planet. In Finland, Nokia wasn't just a corporation. It was a national heartbeat. It contributed nearly 4% of Finland's entire GDP, funded a third of the country's research and development, and employed over 60,000 people directly. The Finns didn't just use Nokia phones. They worshipped them. The Nokia 3310 became a global legend, not because of its features, but because of its sheer indestructibility. You could drop it from a second-floor balcony, run over with a bicycle, submerge it in water, pick it up, and still play Snake without a single glitch. The battery lasted for 7 days on a single charge. For the average consumer in 2006, a phone was a tool, a rugged, utilitarian device designed for calling, texting, and maybe playing a simple game during lunch breaks. Nokia had perfected that formula. They had the supply chains, the brand loyalty, the manufacturing muscle, and the distribution networks that stretched into every village and remote corner of the developing world. They were invincible, or so they thought. On January 9th, 2007, Steve Jobs took the stage at the Moscone Center in San Francisco. The keynote was historic. He unveiled the iPhone, a device that combined a phone, an iPod, and an internet communicator into one beautiful slab of glass and aluminum. It had no physical keyboard, no stylus, no removable battery. It was a radical departure from everything Nokia stood for. Inside Nokia's headquarters in Espoo, Finland, the reaction was dismissive laughter. Nokia's engineers were given prototype iPhones to test, and their internal reports were brutally critical. They pointed out that the iPhone couldn't survive a drop test from 1.5 meters. A standard Nokia phone's passed with flying colors. They mocked the 2-megapixel camera, which was inferior to Nokia's 5-megapixel offerings. They highlighted the lack of 3G connectivity, the inability to copy-paste text, and the weak antenna design that often dropped calls when held a certain way. In a now-famous internal presentation, a Nokia engineer wrote, "The iPhone is a toy. It will never survive the real world." Every single criticism was technically correct. But Nokia was playing the wrong game entirely. They were evaluating the iPhone as a phone. Apple had built it as a pocket computer that happened to make calls. Nokia saw screws, metal, and antennas. Apple saw an ecosystem. While Nokia sat in their boardrooms patting themselves on the back for still selling millions of bricks, the tech world was shifting beneath their feet. In 2008, Apple opened the App Store. Suddenly, the iPhone wasn't just a device. It was a platform. Developers could build anything: games, navigation, health trackers, banking apps, social networks. The phone became an extension of the user's life. Meanwhile, Google, sensing the open lane, acquired Android and gave away completely free to any manufacturer willing to use it. Samsung, HTC, Motorola, and LG jumped on board immediately. Overnight, Nokia was fighting not one competitor, but an entire army of Android-powered devices flooding the market at every price point. Nokia's response was a tragic comedy of corporate incompetence. They had a secret weapon, a revolutionary new touchscreen operating system called MeeGo. It was beautiful, intuitive, and genuinely competitive with iOS. But Nokia's internal culture was paralyzed by fear and bureaucracy. The hardware division refused to cooperate with the software division. Old guard executives wanted to stick with Symbian, a clunky, aging operating system originally designed for keyboards, not fingers. Younger visionaries begged to pivot to MeeGo. The two sides fought bitter internal wars for nearly 3 years. Meetings were held, committees were formed, reports were written. And while they argued, Apple sold 50 million iPhones, and Android activated 200 million devices. In the tech world, 3 years is not a delay. It's a death sentence. By 2010, Nokia was bleeding. The share price had plummeted 70%. In February 2011, the newly hired CEO, Stephen Alop, a former Microsoft executive, delivered a memo that would go down in history. He famously told his employees they were standing on a burning platform in the middle of the North Sea. The fire was licking their feet, and if they didn't jump into the icy water, they would burn alive. But then Alop made a decision that horrified Nokia's engineers. Instead of jumping with their own life raft, MeeGo, he jumped straight into the arms of his former employer. Alop abandoned Nokia's homegrown software entirely and signed an exclusive deal with Microsoft to use Windows Phone as the sole operating system for all Nokia smartphones. It was a desperate gamble. Nokia will become Microsoft's puppet. The Nokia Lumia series launched to glowing hardware reviews. The cameras were industry-leading. The design was sleek and colorful. But the App Store was a desert. Instagram didn't exist on Windows Phone. WhatsApp was delayed for years. Snapchat never arrived. Consumers looked at the Lumia, admired its beauty, then walked straight to the Samsung or Apple counter and asked, "Where are my apps?" Nokia had the hardware, but the ecosystem was dead. On September 3rd, 2013, the bell tolled. Nokia announced it was selling its entire devices and services division to Microsoft for a paltry $7.2 billion. To put that in perspective, at its peak in 2000, Nokia's market cap was over $250 billion. The king of phones had been sold for less than 3% of its former value. Thousands of loyal Finnish employees packed their desks. The factories were shuttered. The iconic headquarters in Espoo was stripped of its name. The company that once defined a nation was reduced to a ghost. Years later, the former chairman of Nokia gave a press interview. When asked what went wrong, he paused, his eyes heavy with regret, and uttered the line that still haunts business schools worldwide. "We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost." That quote is devastating because it reveals the most terrifying truth about business in the modern age. You don't have to commit any cardinal sin to lose. You don't have to make shoddy products, exploit your customers, or commit fraud. You just have to stop evolving. Nokia didn't fail because they hated the future. They failed because they loved the past too much to let it go. They saw the smartphone revolution coming, tested it, analyzed it, and chose to ignore it because it threatened their comfortable, profitable present. The fall of Nokia stands as a haunting monument to the arrogance of success. It teaches us that market share is not a shield, history is not a guarantee, and the biggest tree in the forest is often the first to fall because it refuses to bend in a new wind. Nokia didn't lose because they were stupid. They lost because they were too successful to realize they were already dead.